your teacher thought it'd be great if he called in an expert on governments to be able to tell you a little bit more about how they run, specifically since in early colonization. So we're talking about 1700s and 1800s. They were a monarchy, so why not have a sultan come in and tell you a little bit more about it? That's right. If you remember at the end of Aladdin, I get to become the sultan, or the person that's overall in charge of everything in my country. Primarily during this time, most governments were monarchies. One of the empires that were around during early exploration, and one of the more powerful ones, was the Ottoman Empire. They were ran by a sultan, like me. Now, a sultan comes from an absolute monarchy. I would be in charge of everything. One of the sections in government that's pretty high up is your executive branch. We know our president is a part of the executive branch today, but back then, your highest ranking person or your executive branch for my country would be the sultan. Legislative branch of government, or the people that make the laws, again, would be me. My word is law, so whatever I get to say goes. Like if I was to say, a sultan can marry whoever she wants, then that would be okay, because I'm sultan and I have absolute power to do that. I do have a group of advisors known as the Divan. You may remember the Grand Vizier. But depending on how large my empire is, I may need to put people in charge to make sure that the laws in certain places are being enforced. With the Ottoman Empire, there were specific religious leaders that would be in charge of making sure that rules and laws were followed. Now, a Quadi would be someone that was responsible for what's happening in a smaller place. And they, of course, would be appointed by a group of people who would give adis to different locations and areas to rule over that area and to make sure that the laws were enforced and that they were being just and right to the people. The group of people that appointed the Quadi, Ulema. These were a group of people that had studied the law and understood the law, and therefore were best equipped to enforce the law in those certain areas. Sultans would sneak around in hiding, and they would make sure that the people that had been appointed were doing a good job. And if not, those people would be punished, and punished severely for not doing what is best for the rights of the people. Most monarchies that you think of when you think of a king in charge of a certain group of people, you think of what we refer to as an absolute monarchy. The person, that's the head, in this case the king or the sultan, is in charge of everyone, gets to decide everything. And actually during early colonization, that was not the case in England. England had actually started to become more of a constitutional monarchy, whereas the king was still the figurehead of the country, but a lot of his power was taken away. And it was actually other subsections like Parliament that would have a lot of control over everything. So Parliament would be made up of the House of Lords and Commons. The House of Lords included barons, bishops, dukes, and other high-ranking, very wealthy officials in England. The House of Lords had a lot of power and could veto any laws that may be coming through, so they kind of had final say on what was going on. Also had a House of Commons that was below them. Those were elected officials, and you could vote for anyone that was wanting to run for the House of Commons, but to do that, you had to own property, and only about one man in every 20 in England at that time was actually able to vote for the people in House of Commons. So anything that was going to be passed usually started in the House of Commons and then had to move up the chain to get approved. England started to grow, and as England started to grow, they had to branch out, and they kind of developed a different type of governing, and that's where you had the colonies come in. The person in charge was known as the governor. So the governor of the colonies was appointed by the King of England. So the king could appoint a governor to rule over and be in charge of all the decisions that were being made in the colonies. It was the governor's job to work with a group of individuals in the colony, some of which he appointed, some of which may have been voted in, but they were known as the council. Now the council, they kind of acted like our Supreme Court. Okay, and that would be where they were making decisions and deciding final says on a lot of stuff. But primarily the council acted more as advisors to the governor, who was still having the end-all, be-all say in whatever it was that was being passed, whether it be a law or enforcing a law. Now the council was supposed to work with this group of people called the assembly. The group of individuals in the assembly, they were voted on. Back then, you had to be white and landowner to be able to vote for the people running for the assembly. In colonial America, only about 50 to 80% of the people, depending on the location, was able to vote for their local assembly representatives. Even if you were a representative, you would go, you could have debates, you could try to pass laws, but again, anything that you wanted to have happen had to go to the governor, and the governor had veto power. So you may really, really like something, and the governor not, and so therefore he's going to disagree and he's going to veto it. Governor even has the power in the early colonies to get rid of the assembly. So let's say there's a bunch of people that have been elected and he doesn't like the way that they're doing things and doesn't like what they're saying. He can actually say, I don't like this assembly. I'm going to get rid of all of them and let's have new elections and re-elect some new people. Kind of crazy. Kind of start to see that type of rule and that type of institution that is happening in early colonial America is building a lot of agitation and anger between the two groups of people. And eventually, as we leave in 4th grade social studies content, we will have the American Revolution. But these types of government and this type of interaction and how the people had say or didn't have enough say played a big role in what happens later on.